In this video we are going to create a pure HTML tab navigation. It's also responsive and visually appealing. So let's get started. To start the process, let's open an empty folder and add our index.html and styles.css style sheet. Let's open index.html and create a default HTML document structure. So simply press Shift plus exclamation mark to see HTML document shortcut and hit enter to create a document HTML. Let's change our page title to match our page. In this case, we will call it horizontal tabs. Next, let's create our main container to hold the tabs. We will use .tab container shortcut to automatically create a div container with tab container class assigned. Inside of the h1 tag, we will write Pure CSS tabs text, which is an HTML heading element. So now let's create another div to hold our tabs with class name tabs. And next, let's add the individual tabs inside. We will do 3 tabs for this example. The idea is that we will use radio input and associated labels to create our tab headings. Next, we will create tab content div container to hold the content of the tab. So let's do the same for the rest of the tabs. With each tab, you are simply changing the input ID attribute and associating the label with the specific radio input. And let's do the last one. Okay, now we have our HTML code written. Let's do the styling in CSS to make them look and function like tabs. To start the CSS styling, let's add a link to our styles.css in the header section between head tags. You can use link CSS shortcut and hit enter to create a link to the styles CSS style sheet. Be sure the path to the style sheet is correct. If you placed it in another folder, change the path to your CSS file. Next, let's start creating the styles. Let's first add our global resets. This will help us avoid issues later. We will do this by creating a global selector. When we use this selector in our style sheet, it applies the styles to all elements in the page. At first, let's add margin to 0, which sets the margin of an element to 0 pixels. After, we're going to add padding 0, that sets the padding of an element to 0. Then we will add box sizing and box shadow. The box sizing property will include padding and border in the element's total width and height, and box shadow will remove any box shadow effects. After, we will add font family property that sets the font style to a generic sans serif font. Finally, we will set the color text white. So next, let's add some basic styling for our body tag. Inside of the body tag, we will have at first our margin of 0, which I have mentioned previously. It adds margin of 0 to the element. And after, we're gonna add the padding of 5 rem to the top of the element. Finally, we can set the background color of the element to a dark grayish color. Now let's see the results after body class changes. When we want to preview the changes, it's best to install Live Server extension from the extensions marketplace. When Live Server is installed, you should see Go Live button on the bottom right corner. Simply click to preview the changes. Any new changes made to the code will also automatically show on the preview. Okay, now let's adjust the size of our h1 header tag. So what we're gonna do? We need to add the normal font weight to the text and increase the font size to 35 pixels. And at the end, we will add position, which will position an element relative to its normal position. Now let's see the results after h1 class changes. Next, let's add our main container styles with tab container class. This will contain all of our elements. Let's set the width of an element to 70% and display the element as a flex container, which enables flexible box layout and arrange the flex item vertically by using flex direction column. Now we need to add align item center to align the child elements in the center of the container, and margin 1 rem to set a margin of 1 rem around the element. Now let's see the results after tab container class changes. So we also need another container class to only hold the elements related to tabs. We will name it tabs. Inside of the tab, we can display the element as a flex container and add direction of the flex container to row. Then we need to set the width of an element to 100%. After, let's align the flex item vertically in the center and add a margin of 1 rem around the element. Okay, now let's see the results after tab class changes. Now let's add styling for our tab labels. First, we add display inline block property to make the element display as an inline block, and then we can add a property to specify the amount of padding around the element. In this case, it's 5 rem. After, we add a property to specify the amount of margin around the element. Then let's set a property that changes the cursor to a pointer when hovering over the element. Next, let's add a property to set the font size of the element to 18 pixels. And finally, we will set the text color to light gray and make some transitions effect to the color. Now let's see the results after tab label class changes. We also want to do hover effect or mouse over on tab label. So let's add a hover selector and set the color to white. And let's see the results after this class changes. Next, we need a selector for our tabs, which are radio input elements. Inside, we will have display none property, which will hide the element completely. Then we will have transform scales to 0, that scales an element to a size of 0, effectively making it invisible. Lastly, we will set the element's transparency to completely transparent. And now let's see the results after this class changes. Now let's add some changes for the selected tab using checked selector. Let's set the text color to white and add border button property to 2 pixels solid white border. Finally, let's add the display block property, which will set an element as a block level element, taking up the full width available. Now let's see the results after this class changes. So now let's add styling for our tab content. We also want to position it under the tabs. We are going to add the display none property that hides the element, and then add padding that sets the spacing around an element's content. Also, let's position an element relative to its nearest positioned ancestor. Then let's move it to the left of 1 rem. After, we will set the minimum height of an element to 20 rems and width to 90%. Then we will change the text color to white and add border. Now let's see the results after this class changes. And finally, when a tab is selected, we need to display the content of the selected tab and write display block, which will take up the full width available. So that's it guys for this video. I hope this video was helpful for you. Feel free to ask any questions below in the comments. If you are not subscribed to our channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.